Welcome everyone to the Young Readers One Book Festival. I'm Hannah Glissendorf and I am the director for Black Hills Reads. I would also like to introduce my friends from the South Dakota Statewide Family Engagement Center who have partnered with us on this project.
Hi, everybody. I'm Selena Lehman.
I'm Kelsey Judge. We are here today with Jennifer Widman from the South Dakota Humanities Council and Kate DiCamillo, the author of Tale of Despereaux.
We also have some fellow third graders from around the state that are going to be asking Kate some questions about her book and about what it's like to be an author. We have a really fun and engaging Young Readers One Book event planned for you today. So let's dive in.
Hello, young readers, and welcome to this special event. My name is Jennifer Widman, and I'm from the South Dakota Humanities Council. I'm so happy you're joining us today for a conversation with Kate DiCamillo, the author of the 2023 Young Readers One Book South Dakota, The Tale of Despereaux. The Young Readers One Book is a program that's been going on since 2014, which means this is our 10th year. We give copies of the same book to students like you all around South Dakota, so you can read it, discuss it, and do fun activities in your schools, libraries, and homes. And then we invite the author or the illustrator to come to South Dakota and meet all of you. You are among almost 14,000 third graders across South Dakota who received copies of this beautiful book this year, which is The Tale of Despereaux. The South Dakota Humanities Council was able to share the books with you because of some very generous friends who helped us to pay to publish and distribute them. And you will be able to see their logos on the back of the copies of your books. They include First Bank and Trust and Northern Hills Federal Credit Union, and also the National Endowment for the Humanities. And I'm just so thankful to these sponsors for helping us get these books in your hands. Finally, I am so excited for all of you to meet the author. As I mentioned, her name is Kate DiCamillo, and this is the second of her books that has been chosen as the Young Readers One Book South Dakota, where she has been able to appear with us. Our very first one book in 2014 was The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane, and students all across our state had so much fun reading that book and meeting Kate that we chose another one of her stories this year in The Tale of Despereaux. Let me tell you a little bit about Kate. Kate was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, raised in Claremont, Florida, and now lives in Minneapolis, Minnesota. She writes books for both children and adults, including Because of Winn-Dixie, a Newbery Honor winner, Flora and Ulysses, a Newbery Medal winner, The Tiger Rising and Rainy Nightingale, both National Book Award finalists. So that's a lot of awards. So you know they're really great books. She also writes the Mercy Watson and Tales from Deckawoo Drive series, and she co-writes the Bink and Golly series with Allison McGee. So a lot of books that I bet many of you have checked out of your libraries or maybe even read at home. Kate DiCamillo served as the National Ambassador for Young People's Literature in 2014 and 2015. So she talked to students all around the nation about the importance of stories and how they connect us. And this is one of the things I love about her. She thinks she is an enormously lucky person because she gets to tell stories for a living. So please join me in welcoming Kate DiCamillo.
Hi everyone. It's me, Kate DiCamillo. As Jennifer said in her introduction, I will be coming back to join you for this, and I am so happy. That was 9 years ago, and I had the best time when I came to visit y'all in South Dakota. I mean, the best time. And I've talked about it everywhere I've gone, and it is thrilling to me to get to come back and talk to you about a different book, which, as you know, is The Tale of Despereaux. And this book is the story of a small mouse who becomes an unlikely hero. And I thought that maybe the best way for us to get to know each other a little bit before I get there is to read to you from The Tale of Despereaux. And I thought I would just read you the first chapter. And then after I read you the first chapter, I thought I would talk just a little bit about me as a writer and me as a reader. So let's start with Tale of Despereaux. And it is so exciting to me to think that you all are holding this same book. I mean, it's a gift to get to be a part of this with all of you. So, chapter 1, have to have the glasses. This story begins within the walls of the castle with the birth of a mouse, a small mouse, the last mouse born to his parents, and the only one of his litter to be born alive. "Where are my babies?" said the exhausted mother when the ordeal was through. "Show to me my babies." The father mouse held the one small mouse up high. "There is only this one," he said. "The others are dead." "Two? Just the one mouse baby?" "Just the one. Will you name him?" "All of that work for nothing," said the mother. She sighed. "It is so sad. It is such the disappointment." She was a French mouse who had arrived at the castle long ago in the luggage of a visiting French diplomat. Disappointment was one of her favorite words. She used it often. "Will you name him?" repeated the father. "Will I name him? Will I name him? Of course I will name him, but he will only die like the others. Oh, so sad. Oh, such the tragedy." The mouse mother held a handkerchief to her nose and then waved it in front of her face. She sniffed. "I will name him. Yes, I will name this mouse Despereaux for all the sadness, for the many despairs in this place. Now, where's my mirror?" Her husband handed her a small shard of mirror. The mouse mother, whose name was Antoinette, looked at her reflection and gasped aloud. "Toulouse," she said to one of her sons, "get for me my makeup bag. My eyes are a fright." While Antoinette touched up her eye makeup, the mouse father put Despereaux down on a bed made of blanket scraps. The April sun, weak but determined, shone through a castle window, and from there squeezed itself through a small hole in the wall and placed one golden finger on the little mouse. The other older mice children gathered around to stare at Despereaux. "His ears are too big," said his sister Molo. "Those are the biggest ears I've ever seen." "Look," said a brother named Furlough, "his eyes are open. Pa, his eyes are open. They shouldn't be open." It's true. Despereaux's eyes should not have been open, but they were. He was staring at the sun reflecting off his mother's mirror. The light was shining onto the ceiling in an oval of brilliance, and he was smiling up at the sight. "There's something wrong with him," said the father. "Leave him alone." Despereaux's brothers and sisters stepped back away from the new mouse. "This is the last," proclaimed Antoinette from her bed. "I will have no more mice babies. They are such the disappointment. They are hard on my beauty. They ruin for me my looks. This is the last one. No more." "The last one," said the father, "and he'll be dead soon. He can't live. Not with his eyes open like that." But reader, he did live. This is his story. So that's Tale of Despereaux, which you all are going to get to read. And I wrote that book a long time ago. And for me, the story started with my best friend's son. He was 8 years old at the time. And I had just published my first book, which was Because of Winn-Dixie, which maybe some of y'all know. So I had just published my first book. I was visiting my best friend. Her son was really impressed that I had published a book, and he was a big reader, and he followed me everywhere I went that visit. And before I left, he asked me if he could have a word with me alone. And I'm like, sure, we can talk. So I went into his room, he closed the door, and he said, "This is very serious. I want you to know I have an idea for a book." And I'm like, "Great, what is it?" He said, "It's the story of an unlikely hero with exceptionally large ears." And I said, "Wow, that's a great setup. What happens to the unlikely hero?" And he said, "I don't know. That's why I want you to write the book." And so Luke, that's his name, he's grown up now. Luke didn't say that it was the story of a mouse, but I came home and I thought, what's the most unlikely hero I can think of? And a mouse was right up there. So that's where I got the idea for Despereaux. And it took me a long time to write the story, and it took a lot of drafts to write the story, but it has been one of those stories that changed my life in lots of different ways. And because I've always been a reader as a kid, I have found that stories are so capable of changing our lives, and we're not even aware of it at the time. And that's one of the reasons that I'm so excited to get to talk to you today about stories and their powers of transformation. I was a kid who was, and I'll talk to you about this when I see you live, but I was sick a lot as a kid. I was, and I missed a lot of school, and I was alone a lot. And so one of the things that I did was that I read books all the time. And those books, they saved me, they comforted me. And also because of those books, I got to become a reader. And I'm sure that we'll talk a lot more about that when I see you in person. Like I said, I was sick a lot. What I had was every kind of illness, but so many of these things were contagious, or I had fevers, that I was just home a lot in bed. And I read, and some of those books that I read, I come back to now all the time as somebody who is a writer, trying to figure out how they work their magic with those books. I don't know if any of you have read The Borrowers. This was a book that I just read as a kid and have come back to as an adult to try and work the magic. So The Borrowers are little people. They're like this big. They live in the floorboards of our houses, and they are human, but they're really, really small. And to me, these books were so fantastic because it got that idea, the same idea really as Despereaux, that even if you're small, it doesn't mean that you can't be brave. So The Borrowers, one of the books that I read as a kid. Y'all know Beverly Cleary, right? The Mouse and the Motorcycle. Just absolutely loved Ralph S. Mouse. And, you know, I write, so what's Ralph? A mouse. And I write about Despereaux, a mouse. So you can see how what I read as a kid has influenced what I write as an adult. I loved all those books where animals talked, and it's anthropomorphic animals. And I write a lot of those books where the animals talk. I want to also, I don't know, have y'all read this? This is a book that I read as a kid, and I was the kind of kid who loved to give other kids books to read. And I knew that even if a kid did not like to read books, they would love to read The Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweller. This was a book that you could hand to anybody, and that everybody loved this book. And it is still the case. So like, if you want to give a friend a book that they'll love to read, this one is great. Wait a minute, I've got one more here that I read when I was a kid. Anybody know Harriet the Spy? This book is basically a primer on how to become a writer. Because a lot of times people will say to me, where do you get your ideas? You know, how do you come up with, you know, what do you do? And I say, I eavesdrop. And, you know, I'm kind of being funny, but I'm also telling the truth. And that's what Harriet does. Harriet the Spy goes around and eavesdrops on conversations. She keeps a notebook, which is also what I do. This book is probably the very first time it crossed my mind that I wanted to be a writer when I read this book. I'm not done talking to you about books, because what happened for me was I read all those books as a kid. I went to college. I majored in English. And I decided I wanted to be a writer. And I didn't start to write until I was almost 30 years old. And I wasn't writing for kids when I started writing. But I ended up getting a job in a book warehouse. And I was assigned to the third floor of that warehouse, and it was all children's books. And I started to read some of those books that were on that floor. And I fell in love with children's books all over again as an adult. And the very first novel I read was The Watsons Go to Birmingham, 1963. I wonder if anybody's read this. It is so good. It's so funny. It's so warm. And it talks about something very huge and terrifying. But it does it in a way that, like, it tells this wonderful, laugh out loud, funny story. I read this book and I thought, I want to be able to write something like that. And not too long after I read this book, I started on this because of Winn-Dixie. And without this book, I wouldn't have written this book. So Watsons Go to Birmingham, 1963. I bet you most of you have read this. And the reason I wanted to talk to you about it very briefly today is that I did not read it as a kid. I was worried about, see how worried the pig looks on the cover of Charlotte's Web? I was worried that something terrible was going to happen to the pig in this story. Every time I looked at the cover of this book at the library, I thought, I can't do it. And so I didn't read this book until I started to write for kids. And I had a teacher who said, you cannot write a novel for kids and not read Charlotte's Web. So I read it. I've read it every year since that first time. And I keep on trying to figure out how E.B. White wrote a book that is not just for kids, but for everybody. And I bet you that most of you have read this book. And if you haven't read this book, it is one of the most beautiful, heartbreaking things, and filled with love. The best story about friendship, the best story about being human and a pig and a spider. So Charlotte's Web, another reason that I write.
We want to now take some time to learn a little bit more about Kate and give students the opportunity for some turn and talks. Let's watch this brief clip about Kate and her reading and writing journey. Once the clip is complete, please take a moment and turn and talk with your fellow classmates about who has helped you learn to read, or is there a person you admire as a reader?
When I go out and I talk to people about being a writer, a lot of times people ask me, when you were a kid, did you dream of becoming a writer? And always I have the same answer, which is no, what I dreamed of becoming was a reader. I wanted so desperately to read. And I was really, really lucky in that my mother read to me all the time. I have a brother who's 3 years older than I am. He read to me too. But I wanted to read for myself. I was desperate for that. I was desperate to learn. And when I was growing up, you didn't get taught how to read until first grade. And where I was growing up was in a small town in Central Florida called Claremont. And so I went trotting off to Claremont Elementary, first grade, filled with hope and I just thought, wow, they're going to teach me how to read on the very first day of school. I cannot wait. I had been counting the days until this happened. And I got to first grade, and not only did I not learn how to read on the first day of first grade, but I struggled because in that time and place, there was one way that they taught you how to read, and that was with phonics. And for whatever reason, phonics didn't, actually still doesn't, make any sense to me. And I remember coming home from school and standing in front of my mother and sobbing, saying, I don't understand. I want to read, and I don't understand these lines over the top of letters and the upside down. I don't understand any of it. It doesn't make any sense to me. And I was just almost hysterical. My mother said to me, for the love of Pete, calm down. And then she said, this is a wonderful thing to say to me. She said, there's always a way around. If that doesn't make any sense to you, then we'll do it a different way. You've got a good memory. You're smart. I tell you what, let's just memorize the words. So what my mother did was she made me flashcards. I can still see these flashcards. One word on each flashcard. I would come home from school. I would go into the kitchen with my mom. I would sit on a kitchen stool. She would sit on the other kitchen stool. One at a time, she would hold up the flashcards, tell me what the word said. I would memorize it. We would go through a whole stack of them. I can still see those flashcards in my head. I still remember those words: truck, trick, cat, there, them, just word after word after word. And guess what? I woke up one day and I could read because my mom had sat there and worked with me that way, and worked and showed me that there was a different way to do it. There's always a way around and through. And it was a really wonderful, it was a gift that she gave me in a lot of different ways.
I hope you had a chance to have some really good conversations about your own reading journey with the people around you. So now let's watch another clip of Kate discussing what she considers to be her safe space for when she's writing. Once this clip is complete, please take some time to turn and talk again, but this time focus on what you consider to be a safe space for your own reading, writing, working on homework, or just to relax.
Where could you start? How could you, if you felt like you wanted to tell a story, what could you do? Well, if there's any way you could make for yourself a safe space, like this writing studio is for me, just a little room or even a part of a room where it can just be yours, where you can keep things around that inspire you, like, puppets, rabbit dolls that you were given as gifts, books that you will read again and again. That's one way to start making art and telling stories. Another thing is to read. So read as much as you can and as many different kinds of books as you can, and reread the books. Like I said, I go back to so many books trying to figure out how they make the magic work. So read, reread, and then you're going to have to figure out a way to sit down and do the work. Remember when I talked about my alarm clock and how it was set for 4:30? I'm not saying that you have to set an alarm clock for 4:30, but is there a way that you can make a deal with yourself about how you're going to do the work? For me, it was just to write 2 pages a day. And I bet that you could probably write 2 pages a day if you want to write. So sit down and do a little bit of writing every day, make a deal with yourself about doing it, and then be willing to rewrite it. So you read, reread, write, rewrite, because it's never going to come out right the first time. You have this beautiful thing that's in your head, and it doesn't always come out right when you try to put it down on paper. You have to keep on working. You do draft after draft, sketch after sketch. And then the notebook. See if you can get a notebook just for you. Nobody else needs to look inside of it, read it, or anything. It's just for you. And it's like I said at the beginning, it's a thing to carry around to remind you that you should keep everything open, your eyes, your ears, your heart, your brain, but also that everything kind of, if you're going to tell stories, everything is your business.
Okay, now we're going to take some time to hear from some third graders across the state who have some questions for Kate. Our first question is from Penn from Brookings, South Dakota.
I'm 8 years old, and was there a pet that inspired the character of Despereaux?
And what a great question. I have, you know, it's so funny because, like I said, I wrote Despereaux a long time ago, and I've answered lots of questions about this mouse. No one has ever asked if Despereaux was based on a pet mouse. And the answer is no, but I did have a pet mouse named Pinky. And I haven't thought about that mouse for a while. And I have to say, it would probably be very pleasing for Pinky to think that maybe he had something to do with Despereaux and all of Despereaux's heroics. But also, as I said in the beginning, I love all those books with characters of mice and talking mice. And so they have always been on my mind, with or without Pinky. But can I say something else, Penn, about just like writing based on your pets? It's a great question because it also shows everybody a way in to, when people say, I don't know where to start, I don't know how to write a novel, look around you. Do you have a pet? Can you imagine your way into your pet's story? Can you write in first person and write the story of the pet like the pet is telling it? It's a great way to imagine yourself into another life. So fantastic question, Penn.
Our next question is from Regan and Ruby from Pierre.
My name is Regan Webb. I am 8 years old. My name is Ruby Webb, and I'm also 8 years old. What do you do when you don't feel like writing?
Regan and Ruby, you want to know what I do when I don't feel like writing. And you know, I'm going to tell you the truth. And everybody's going to be kind of appalled, but this is the truth. Most mornings, I do not feel like writing. And I have learned that I feel better if I just go ahead and do the work and get the work done than if I spend the day thinking, I don't want to write, I don't want to write, I'm not going to write. And then I end up not writing. So writing for me is a very strange thing. And I know a lot of people who write, and it's different for everybody. But for me, I'm always a little bit afraid to do it. When I'm doing it, I think, I don't know how this is all going to turn out. So I'm like, this is never going to work. I should just put it aside. But as I said, what I've learned is, even when I don't feel like doing it, I just make myself go in and sit down and do it. And I'm happier because of that. And I work in a very slow way. So I only do 2 pages a day when I'm working on a novel. So I always think, no matter what, I can just go in there and do those 2 pages. So the short answer, which I'm thinking you're probably wishing that I've gotten to, is that I go ahead and write even when I don't want to write. That's what I do on the days that I don't want to write. I write anyway.
Next question is from Carter from Sioux Falls.
My name is Carter Mulwini. I'm 8 years old, and I live in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And my question is, what was your favorite book when you were a kid?
Carter, Carter, I cannot pick a favorite book from when I was a kid. I loved to read. I read everything. There are books that I came back to often, but there was not one favorite book. And if I was standing right in front of you right now, I would say to you, Carter, tell me your absolute favorite book. And I would guess that you would say, I can't pick just one. And that's the way it is for me. Even now as an adult, when I look back on what I loved to read as a kid and as an adult who loves to read, I cannot pick just one favorite book. But Carter, this book, and like I said, I reread it every year. It keeps on showing me ways to tell a story, ways to show my heart. So I cannot pick a favorite, but I can say that this book, if I had read it when I was a kid, maybe would have been my favorite.
Our last question is from Mason from Rapid City.
Hi Kate, my name is Mason and I'm 9 years old. I live in Rapid City, South Dakota. Who gave you the inspiration to write this book?
Mason, I talked about that in my introduction to y'all, that my best friend's son Luke asked for the story of an unlikely hero with exceptionally large ears. So that's where Despereaux came from. And that whole experience with Luke and listening to somebody who had an idea and listening to the way that he phrased it, because it was really that unlikely hero bit that caught my attention. I loved that phrase. That whole thing convinced me, because it was really hard to write the Tale of Despereaux. I didn't know what was going to happen. I'm not the kind of writer who works with an outline. All I knew was that I had a mouse who was going to go into a dungeon to try to save a princess. And it seemed impossible to me. And so Luke gave me the idea, but what I learned from writing Tale of Despereaux is that what seems like it's impossible can become possible if you just show up and do a little bit of work every day. And for me, that was the great gift of Luke's idea, was this thing of like, I did feel just like Despereaux, like I was so small, so powerless, and yet I had to do this big task, which was to tell the story of the bravery of this small mouse. And it was a huge gift to me to figure out that I could do it, just like all of you. If you want to write a story, you can do it too. And that's one of the things that we'll talk about when I get there, because to me, it's the most important thing I can tell you, that if you want to tell a story, you can tell a story too. You're brave enough to do it.
We had some really wonderful questions come from students across South Dakota, and thank you so much, Kate, for providing some great insight. I think Kate has provided us with valuable information about her experience, and it stands out to us that it is so important to keep going no matter how hard it may be, and that you can do anything you set your mind to. We want to take one last opportunity now to pause and reflect. So check out this brief clip of her talking about how important it truly is to believe in yourself. Once it's done, let's take one more pause and chat with your classmates about something that you maybe didn't understand at first, but that you worked hard to accomplish.
Then believe in yourself. It's like, if you want to do this thing, you can do it. And you just have to make your way slowly, word by word. You can find your way.
thank you to all of you for spending this time with us today. And it really, really matters to me and I'm so looking forward to getting to meet you in person, but just this connection matters and makes me believe all the more in the power of story and the power of you as readers, because I can feel you out there reading, and it really, really matters, and it connects us. So if you attend school in the Black Hills, please stay on past the credits for a special announcement. And thank you to all of you for listening and being a part of this.
Hi again, everyone. Again, my name is Hannah Glissdorf, and I am the director of Black Hills Reads. We have a very exciting opportunity for you. Your teachers will be telling you more about the writing competition that will be coming up soon, where you will have a chance to win a bunch of amazing prizes. But I am excited to announce that we will be doing a writing contest with the theme of Unlikely Hero. The Tale of Despereaux exists because Kate DiCamillo had a dream and put it into writing. Everyone has a unique imagination, and we are so excited to read your thoughts and what you come up with, and all the thoughts that you can put on paper. We're really excited to see what you come up with.